topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin ArnoldAnd believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin ArnoldAnd.
Thanks for joining in again today. I am Kevin ArnoldAnd, and welcome back to another episode of Winning Business TV and Radio. We're on W4CY.com. We're streaming live on Talk4TV.com. And of course, we're on Facebook, and that's at Winning Business Radio. And you can find us after the live show on every platform where you find your favorite podcasts: YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, etc. The mission of Winning Business Radio and TV, as regular viewers and listeners know, is to offer insights and advice to help people avoid the mistakes of others, to learn best practices. That's the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, and I hope to be challenged and hopefully to be inspired by the successes of others. Those are consultants, coaches, advisors, authors, founders, and owners. Today's a founder and owner. Entrepreneurs, people with expertise. But virtually every successful person I've ever had a chance to talk to has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. I said every week, we all have to get our knees skinned once in a while, so I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. I've spent the better part of my career equipping businesses to grow, from solopreneurs to small and medium-sized businesses, all the way up to the Fortune 50. I've seen some of those companies win, and to varying degrees, I've seen some fail. I've had the opportunity to rub elbows with some of the highest performing people around, and with some who probably should have found other professions. In my own businesses, I've had lots of success, but some failures too. And I like to think I've learned a lot from those experiences. So you're going to hear from me, my opinions and insights. But more importantly, you're going to hear from our experts. And today is no exception. Today, my guest is Matthew Arnold, founder of architectural firm ArnoldAnd. Here's his bio. Matt Arnold has worked as an architect in the city of Boston and surrounding areas for the past 2 decades, most notably in a senior leader role, hope I said this correctly, Matt, at Hasten in Boston's South End. During that time, he earned a reputation for work that masterfully blended modern design and sustainability features within historic homes and buildings, both throughout the city and greater Boston. So much so that when he launched ArnoldAnd at the end of 2024, Modern Luxury Interiors magazine named Matt as part of its Ones to Watch class of 2025. Matt says, at ArnoldAnd, our mission is to create a design with our clients that elevates their life, enhances the community, and truly reflects their vision, with me being the instrument that makes it happen. How we get there is through a close, collaborative process and a real attention to detail, understanding what matters in the day-to-day lives of our clients. Matt's work emphasizes a seamless balance between client vision and architectural integrity. He places a strong emphasis on collaboration and creativity while ensuring that every project meets the highest standards of quality, budget alignment, and timely delivery. His approach fosters trust and clear communication, resulting in spaces that resonate deeply with clients and end users alike. Matt's portfolio includes successful projects in Boston and across New England, where he's brought his understanding of both architecture and real estate to life. From conceptual design to construction and post-occupancy, he guides clients through every stage of the process with meticulous attention to detail and an unwavering commitment to sustainability and innovation. This ethos drives his work and his interactions with clients and the broader community. Outside of work, Matt thrives on creativity and inspiration. You can often find him biking through the city, exploring new design ideas, or attending events that fuel his passion for architecture and growth. He's a member of the BSA's Residential Design Committee, the Boston Preservation Alliance, and Level Up Mastermind. Matt received his undergraduate degree from New England Institute of Technology in Warwick, Rhode Island, and a master's degree from Northeastern. He and his wife, Hope, live with their son, Aiden, in the Jamaica Plain section of Boston. As it turns out, we're neighbors, but only about a few miles away. Matt, welcome to Winning Business Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. Super excited to be here today.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm excited too. So let's start in with some questions. Tell us about Hope and Aiden.
Well, I met my wife, Hope, at Northeastern. She is also, well, she was trained as an architect. She works at an architecture firm, but she is actually not a practicing architect. She works for a very interesting architecture firm in the South End called Mass Design Group, who's a nonprofit architecture firm. And she works in their communications and philanthropy team, if I can say that. So it's kind of cool because, we both speak the same lingo. Yeah. We both speak the same language, but she operates in a very different architectural world than I do on a day-to-day basis. So I find that pretty intriguing. We met at Northeastern. We've been together for quite a long time. And our son Aiden is 12 weeks old.
Wow.
Welcomed our first child into the world on February 15th of this year. So, this has been a year of change for my wife, big time change.
Oh, very exciting. What's your best part of being a dad so far?
Oh man. I mean, he is literally, this week, last week, starting to react when he sees me, when I walk into the room, when I pop into his face. The smile, the reaction is all new. So he's actually acknowledging me. So I got to say, the first few weeks, you're just keeping the baby alive, right? I mean, everybody who has parents knows. But the moment to see the personality start to kind of sparkle in his eyes and come out has been pretty wild. And I just assume this is going to, exponentially grow as he gets older and older.
So in the words of Ron Burgundy, you're becoming a pretty big deal. at least as far as he's concerned.
Yeah, exactly. I'm half his world, right?
That's right. All right. So you and I are neighbors, not by very far, but it gets even better because I grew up in Medfield, which is the next town, 2 towns away from, 2 towns away from,
2 towns
from Medway, where you grew up. Tell us about Medway and what it was like to grow up there.
Medway, grew up in Medway, small town, had a lot of fun there, had a great community of friends and people around us. We lived on a small street, had a couple of friends right on the street. I spent my life on 2 wheels, really, whether it was a bicycle, I guess 8 wheels because of rollerblades, or a dirt bike. And, my dad would say, you would leave at the crack of dawn and I would tell you, be home by dark. And, around dark, dusk time, he'd be yelling out, Matthew. And he'd hear me off in the distance kind of responding back. And he said, I'd come back skinned head to toe with dirt, scrapes, bumps, but loving life. Awesome. I loved being on 2 wheels, the bicycle and the dirt bike. It was a very small community. We lived in an old house that we fixed up throughout my kind of entire childhood. It was always a work in progress with my dad. He let me do a lot of the work as well. And it was a good place to grow up. And I was always connected to Boston and close to Boston. So Boston was always the draw. Oh my God, Boston. We would take the commuter rail in from Franklin with our bikes and ride around for the entire day in the city and then take the commuter rail home. And that, that was about the coolest thing ever. So, I was always really, really attracted to the city. I kind of assumed I would end up here one day, and I have, which is kind of exciting for me. So
I'm going to get into the Lego story in a second, but were you drawn to that architecture even then?
I think so. I was always very intrigued by the kind of urban environment. Again, Medway was very nice, very pretty. Had great neighborhoods, but it didn't spark the interest like the city did. It didn't absorb or kind of heighten all of my senses like a city did. When we got off that train in South Station or Back Bay, I felt very at home. It felt very cool. I was very interested, and I really just never wanted to leave it. It was really something that drew me towards it.
So I understand that at a very young age, I don't know exactly the age, you'll tell us, but that you were into design and architecture, even if you didn't call it that, but because you were into Legos and you built a lot of things. Tell us about that and include your Lego city in the story.
Yeah, my Lego city. Yeah. So from a very young age, I
Mm,
was attracted to Legos. Honestly, I don't even know how I got connected to Legos. It must have been through my father.
mm,
Um, and my dad said, every year all I wanted was Legos, just Legos for Christmas, Legos for my birthday. And I would build the Legos to the thing on the box and then, kind of dismantle it and repurpose the pieces for my own city. Now, we
mm.
lived in this older home in Medway, had a lot of rooms and stuff. So I had my bedroom and then I had a Lego room, which I don't know if he gave me this room or I just like took it over, or we didn't have a ton of stuff in this house. So there was
Yeah.
space. And I just slowly over the years started to amass the city. And again, I never thought anything of it as a kid. My dad really didn't think anything of it until people, his friends and stuff,
Mm,
literally would say, like, what is this kid doing here? And, my dad my dad was big into videographer, VHS tapes.
mm.
So he started to take video of me taking him on an architectural tour of my Lego city.
That's
Now,
cool. Yeah.
this was totally instinctual. I had no clue what I was doing. And, at some point, my dad recognized this through his friends and so forth, kind of bringing it up. And so I think he leaned into it a bit by videotaping me and asking me to tell him what was going on. So I don't think it was fully aware what he was doing, but he
Yeah.
was subconsciously aware of like bringing out a skill that I had that I didn't even know I had. And I really loved it. I mean, I still actually have the Legos today. I have a huge tub of Legos in the basement some of these Legos are probably from, the early 80s.
Mm, mm.
And I don't even know, honestly, what Legos are like today, but I know for me, those were like the building blocks, literal building blocks of my life in many ways.
A lot of young adults are into Legos. They build these massive projects. Our 28-year-old has built the London Bridge, it's Big Ben, right? The London
Okay.
Bridge.
Yeah.
She's built some Star Wars stuff, some Harry Potter stuff. It's really intricate. I mean, it takes a
Oh,
long time.
interesting.
And she has a
Yeah.
process. She spreads it all out into different containers, but so I can see it. I can see it. So you worked even when you were young, I don't know how old again, but on small projects during school breaks with your general contractor stepdad, right? Tell us
That's
about that.
That's correct. Yeah, my stepfather ran a kind of a small kind of contracting company. He did like a lot of painting. The company was Sale Painting, actually, now that I think of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we were living in Bellingham at the time.
Mm-hmm.
My mother and my stepfather lived in Bellingham. My father had the house in Medway. And I just happened to kind of go to the Medway schools. But,
Yeah.
my stepfather, I needed a job, and he somehow, some way said, hey, come work with me. I'll give you some work. And then he started to kind of like lend me out to his friends in a way, like, hey, this guy, Bob, he's building this thing. He needs some help. Want to go work
So
with him?
what
Oh,
you didn't
sure.
know is he was paying you whatever, $10 an hour. He's billing you out at 20.
Yeah, probably. Right. Yeah. He was entrepreneur in his own way. Right. So I ended up just kind of going through a whole bunch of different
Mm,
trades, from painting to framing to tile work, working in people's homes, bathrooms, commercial spaces. I ended up getting a lot of different perspective of the construction world. And it was really just because, somebody would have something and I would
yeah.
move on to the next person and
Yeah.
the next person. So there was no rhyme or reason to it all. But, in hindsight, it just kind of gave me this. I touched a bunch of different things,
Yeah.
right? And it gave me some literal knowledge about, like, I could speak to subcontractors and say, okay, I might not be an expert in what you do because you're the subcontractor, but I've kind of done this at one point in my life. So I have a different communication structure with you.
Mm,
I have a different
yeah.
level of respect with you than somebody who, maybe hasn't had the opportunity to do this.
When did you know that you wanted to actually be an architect?
Oh man, I think I went all through high school and everything, and
Mm,
a guidance counselor. It was coming to the end of high school. I
yeah.
really did not know what to do. So many people, knew what they're going to do, knew where they were going to go to college. It was kind of all mapped out. I thought I was just going to work in the trades. But my parents, my stepfather and my father and my mother, they all encouraged me to, not do something so physical. My stepfather had a lot of physical issues, I think, because of some of the work, and a lot of his friends had back, knee pain. They knew that I should do something behind a desk because our body couldn't do this for 40 years. So I really had a high school guidance counselor that kind of made the recommendation, and that was the start of it.
Very cool. All right, we're going to take our first break. So we'll be back, Matt and everybody, in about 1 minute with Matt Arnold.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallenand on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallenand, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallenand.
We're back with Matthew Arnold, founder and principal architect of ArnoldAnd. We'll get to that name in a moment. When did you decide you wanted to attend New England Institute of Technology?
So the guidance counselor who had given me some recommendations on, hey, you should really think about architecture, I believe he went to New England Tech. And so he kind of turned me on to the school. I went and toured a few other schools, but there was something about their approach, their program. It was a little bit more technical in nature. It was kind of an architectural engineering degree in many ways. And I kind of gravitated towards that kind of tectonic nature of it. Like, we took some structures classes. We did more engineering things than I think a lot of architecture schools do. And so I just kind of gravitated toward that because it felt, I think, more connected to, the trades, which is where I had come from. So I think that's, kind of drew me in, and I ended up getting there, really loving it right from the get-go, doing very well, winning a lot of awards and just getting a very high GPA. And it was very, very clear very early on, like, this was it. It just clicked. It just clicked way more than high school ever clicked for me. I was an okay student in high school, but it wasn't, I wasn't an inspiring student. And the minute I found architecture, I think, after that first semester, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm in. I like this. And I just haven't looked back,
And it wasn't much later, but a little later when you decided to get your master's. What was behind that decision?
Yeah, so I graduated from New England Tech. In order to become a registered architect, you needed a master's degree from a accredited school. I didn't really realize that when I went into undergraduate. And so I started saying, okay, well, I think I want to do this. I need to be an architect. I want to be registered. So I decided to go back to grad school, and where better to go than my favorite city, Boston. And, found Northeastern. They had a very early program for me. And I went. I said, this is it. I love it. And I dove in there head first, kind of the same thing, did really well, and have been in the community ever since. So.
And it's a master's in architecture, correct?
Yes, master's in architecture. Yep.
So during, I know there's some overlap, but you've had multiple internships from about 2004 to 2010, some of which again overlapped with career or professional positions. Tell us about some of those and maybe some of the lessons you learned along the way.
Well, one of the earlier on internships I had was working at an engineering firm. And I thought, maybe I wanted to be an engineer. Actually, I kind of deviated from my dream a little bit. I knew I wanted to be an architect young on. Then I said, okay, well, maybe I go this engineering route. Well, I worked at an engineering firm, good firm, local firm, great people, but I was there for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not for me. It was, I wanted that. It wasn't scratching my creative itch, right?
Mm-hmm.
I liked the technical aspect of the engineering, but it didn't have the creativity driving the results, right? It was more, the mathematical aspects of driving results in the engineering. So that was definitely an early lesson, like, hey, don't deviate. Make sure you stick with your dream. Make sure this internship fits in where you want to go. And then after that, I worked at a small architecture firm, and immediately again knew, okay, this is more akin to what I want. And as I worked my way through different firms, I definitely learned different aspects. I worked at some firms that kind of focused more on institutional work, and then I got to work at some firms that focused a little bit more on the residential hospitality side. And I think, early on, I realized like I'm more of a kind of residential hospitality architect than an institutional, campus architect, which, I mean, they're fantastic architects and they're very well needed. But me personally, I connected with the more kind of domestic nature of architecture, and that could be residential or hospitality.
So your first professional position, it seems, was at MDA Design Center. You had that role for about 7 years. Tell us about that role and some of the key lessons learned there.
So that was actually my own side hustle. Yes, my
MDA.
moonlighting.
I should have seen that. Okay, yeah.
Yes. So I, again, when I
big national, international firm then, right?
Yeah, won many competitions. Because of my stepfather and his community of friends, at a very young age, I started my own business in a way.
That makes sense with the timeline that I saw. Okay.
Yes, moonlighting. As under the umbrella of MDA, I probably did about 150 projects over the course of however many years. But his friends would come to me and say, "Hey, I have a deck, I have an addition, I have a kitchen. Do you want to design?" Sure. I was kind of bullish about it. I just took chances that, in hindsight, maybe a little bit risky in terms of not knowing what I was really doing, but I learned a ton. I did make some mistakes. Luckily, I was working with people who were understanding, and they all had, I was working for folks who had a personal interest in me succeeding. So they weren't going to bury me if I did something wrong. And I definitely remember a few phone calls that were like, "Don't do that again, kid." But, you learn. You got to learn from your mistakes. And there's no better way. And you want to make sure you do it with people that care about you and who have an interest in seeing you succeed. But yeah, I think there's no better lesson than doing, right?
So as an architect, you need to be licensed?
Yes.
And were you for those years?
No, I was not. So I was under a certain threshold of size of project. You do not need to be licensed. Okay. So I operated underneath that threshold. And then, I got licensed much later in life. But I kind of found that little bit of a loophole.
Okay, then Hasten. Am I saying that correctly?
Haseen, yes. I know it's an often.
Geez, not even close.
It's an often. No, people say Hasten a lot.
Okay, good. At least I'm not alone. How did you get that role? I think I know the answer, but I want people to hear.
David Haseen, the founding principal and still principal there today, was my professor in school at Northeastern. He was a professor of housing. Him and I just connected and clicked. I really loved his class, did well in his class. We just hit it off. And at the end of it, we were going into a summer and he said, "Hey, you want to do an internship?" I was like, "Yes, I do." And I went there in, the summer of 2009, and I just kind of never left. 2009, there wasn't a ton going on in the architecture building world, so I was very lucky to kind of have that.
That was my fault. Technical problem.
Oh, all right. Here we are back. That was quick. But yeah, I was very lucky to have that position. And I found myself there when I graduated school. He kind of came back and said, "Hey, would you like to come and work here as a full-time professional?" And I said, absolutely. I was very happy that he kind of asked me to do that.
So your license coincided with the role at Haseen?
Yeah, I got licensed a few years after I started Haseen. You have to go through, you have to do a certain amount of hours in a firm and document all of that under the IDP. And then you sit for 6 exams, which is it's treacherous. It's not an easy process. So I did that while at Haseen. The firm David and the firm were proponents of it. They were very much encouraging of doing it. There was, financial reimbursement through it because the tests they're not cheap.
Oh yeah.
But they were very much encouraging me, like, hey, if you want to be a practitioner in this world, you should carry a license, whether you use it or not,
And what are some of I was going to qualify it. I won't qualify it. What are some of the projects you worked on
at Haseen?
At Haseen, yeah.
So I did a number. I worked a lot in their hospitality world. Haseen has been responsible for a number of restaurants and retail establishments around the South End, including like Shore Leave Restaurant, Black Lamb, Glass House. Did some of the early flour bakeries for Joanne Chang in the South End. And so I got the pleasure of working on a lot of those projects at Haseen. I also, everybody at Haseen kind of works on private residential in some way or another because it's a little bit of their bread and butter. And so I also had the opportunity to do some very nice private residential projects in the city.
So because this audience is at least nationwide, there are some out of the country listeners and viewers as well. Describe the South End in terms of its architecture.
So the South End that's good point. South End is a great neighborhood in the city of Boston that is all brownstones. It's 4 or 5 story buildings. It's a grid, and it's created of these bow front brick brownstones that create all of these great streets. And in different parts, the buildings pull back to create these squares with fountains. It's a really, really fun place. If anybody knows Back Bay in Boston, South End is kind of like the hipper version of Back Bay, a little smaller, a little more grungy, not quite as ornate, but very, very kind of cool and hip. It's a really beautiful and a very classic Boston neighborhood. So it's really fun being able to work there.
If you see not a gritty movie like Gone Girl or I think that's the one, Matt and Ben, but if you see movies that are built in the neighborhoods, that's what you're going to see, right? That iconic, as you said, the bow front. I didn't know to call it that, but it makes sense. The bow front brownstones.
Yeah.
So you'd work on a lot of those, and a lot of those are residences.
Yes, private residences.
In a what would look like a multifamily unit, or a building, but they're really residences.
Exactly. Yeah. Some were multifamily where we did 2 or 3 units in them, and some were, 5-floor townhouses that were 1 resident. I mean, pretty spectacular projects that we were able to do for some really fantastic clients in the city. I mean, it was really kind of a privilege to do some of that work.
What were some of other than the historic aspect, we'll get to that in a minute too, but what were some of the challenges, or are some of the challenges in working with a building like that?
Oh man, I mean, construction-wise, some of those buildings were in some massive disrepair. We would have to kind of hollow out the inside of the building, and you'd leave the brick shell and frame, new floor systems in there. I mean, sometimes we'd walk in and you could look up, 40 feet into the air. It was quite wild. And the contractors that did that kind of work were literally surgeons. They were surgical.
Lots of stairways, right? Lots of staircases. Sometimes elevators, I imagine.
Most of the time. I think almost every private residential project we did had some sort of an elevator. Yeah. But the stairs become this really beautiful element within the home. And it's not a staircase like you think. Like, these were really heavily designed, beautiful elements that connected multiple floors.
I've been in a couple, not many, but the couple that I've been in were just gorgeous. It was clear that people invested a lot,
Yes. A lot of time and energy.
All right. It is almost the bottom of the hour, so we'll take our break right here. We'll be back in another minute with Matthew Arnold.
Thank you.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Halloran. on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
The YP.com website is your local search engine. If you're looking for a good restaurant, it can help you find the right one nearby with ratings and reviews. Or if your car breaks down, you can use the YP app to find the closest repair shop. Or maybe you're just looking for something to do on a Friday night. Well, it has great local coupons for all sorts of things in your area. No matter what, when, or where, if you're looking for something, YP Local Search can help you find it. So go to YP.com or download the app to search local, find local, and save local.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We're back with Matthew Arnold, founder and principal architect of ArnoldAnd. Okay, now the big question, and I think I love this stuff, but the more fun of the interview is, when and why did you decide to go on your own?
That's a great question. So I technically started my own business June 1st of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So my business is coming up on a 1-year anniversary in about a couple of weeks, 2 weeks,
Congrats.
3 weeks. Thank you. I'm very excited. I started my own practice because I had the realization that I needed to live out my own dream. And I had, from the childhood I had growing up, I had always thought I would be my own boss, that I would open my own firm, that I would be a kind of principal architect in many ways.
Well, you were with Lego City. I mean,
I was with Lego City, and I was with MDA as
Yeah,
well. I was kind of already running my own show on the side, and I loved the kind of business aspect. I loved the kind of thrill of running a firm, right? I've had people say to me, "Oh man, you must have so much anxiety about what's coming next." I actually feel more calm now that I'm on my own than I actually did working for somebody else. I feel actually less anxiety, and surprisingly enough.
All right. So I'm going to have fun with this question. In spite of the fact that, or not question, but you know where I'm going, right? You came home and told your wife, Hope, and then a couple days later, she and
Oh, no.
there. That one wasn't my fault. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. So you came home and said, I'm starting a firm. And she said, well, guess what? We're pregnant.
Yes, that did happen. I gave my notice on a Thursday. Saturday night, she came home and said, I need to talk to you. I was like, oh, okay. And she handed me a pregnancy test. And
So there's
said,
some risk there. There's maybe a little bit of fear, but tell us about it.
oh man, yeah. I mean, she said, we're not changing any of your plans. Obviously we knew this was possible. We had been talking about starting a family for a while.
Yep.
We knew it was possible. And, she honestly said, are you freaking out? And I could honestly say to her, no, I really didn't feel like I was freaking out. And, I think, first a lot of things might have ran through my head, but this past year, actually being my own boss in many ways, working out of the house, having flexibility has been one of the greatest gifts I've had in a long time. I didn't even realize how much flexibility would work in my favor right now with doctor's appointments prior to the birth. And now I'm home every day and I get to interact with them, in little moments throughout the day that I couldn't imagine having to report to an office from 9 to 5 right now and miss all the things that I see throughout the day. That's really, it's like one of those, it's just something I just wasn't thinking about and wasn't aware of, but it's been a gift to be home and to be available and have the flexibility to, be with and help my family in ways that I didn't even know I was going to need to. So it's pretty cool.
How big is your workspace and what kind of setup do you need?
So you're looking at the workspace. My wife's workspace is kind of behind us, although right now that's a little on hold. She's not doing a whole lot of work from home. She has a full-time job. It's just slightly different. But I really just work at my desk here. I have a couple of monitors. I have my laptop. And, through mediums like this and Zoom and Google Drive, and it's amazing how I can run a practice with so little infrastructure, right? Like I don't have to have clients to my house. I travel to their house. I get samples shipped to me and to them. The post-COVID, the world, it was like it was set up for me to do this. And I didn't know all of that until I fumbled my way into all this and say, okay, well, I have to do this. How am I going to do this? I used to do it this way, but now I can't. So now I'm going to do it this way. And I have found my way through every single little challenge there has been. It's just all sitting right in front of me. It's pretty amazing.
Well, I understand you're still really connected to the firm, to the old firm, and you still call them family.
I do. Yeah. Oh, they're always going to be my family. I was with them last week. We go for beers. I go for lunch with David. Like, I spent 15 years with these people. I mean, you don't just turn that off, right? A number of them are JP residents and live locally.
Yep.
I'll see them at the Whole Foods or in town, or walking to get ice cream or something. At
JP Licks, by the way, we got to say that.
Yes, absolutely.
I should get
it's pretty cool.
Some ad revenue for that shout out. Do you still use paper and table, or is it all digital?
It's all digital.
It is.
Yeah. I never had the strongest hand of terms of hand sketching. Like some of the, gentlemen in the office, the older gentlemen in the office, they came from that. They could sit down with a piece of paper and create on a piece of paper that I just could never do. And now, everything is shared digitally, PDFs, Zoom meetings. People want that digital kind of footprint on everything. So yeah, I'll do some sketching by hand when I'm really trying to think through a problem, but most everything is kind of digital these days.
Is there a tool you use other than Zoom and PDFs to collaborate?
Google Drive and all the Google suites is a very helpful one, between the Google Docs and all that stuff.
I didn't know if there was a proprietary, industry specific tool.
No. It's, communication via email and Zoom is pretty much how it goes. Yeah. It works very well.
So tell us what was behind the ArnoldAnd firm name.
Yeah. So, when I first started thinking about what I was going to call this, I actually operated from June until like the beginning of this year with no name. People were like, "What's your company name?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't even have one." I was still getting business. I was still doing work. I was cranking away, and it gave me a little bit of time to kind of reflect on what do I want it? What do I want this to be? So many people, when I started this, said, "What's your 5-year plan?" And I said, "My 5-year plan is to not have a 5-year plan," because I didn't know, right? I needed some time to digest. So, it seemed obvious at first, like, okay, I'll just call it Matt Arnold Architects. But, I really think of myself as more than an architect. I really didn't want to, prescribe my future before it had even begun. Yeah. So working with my design partner, Agency Bell, we started to think about, well, how do we build something that can evolve as I evolve as a person and a professional? And so it was, originally thinking of like Arnold and architecture instead of like Arnold Architects. It's about Matthew Arnold and his relationship to Arnold architecture. But the more we thought about it, we thought, well, what if we dropped the architecture and it was just ArnoldAnd? And the and becomes like the open-ended book for and architecture and development and design and living. And it created this ability to allow ArnoldAnd to be what it needed to be when it needed to be it, right? And the and could be a client, it could be a collaborator, it could be a different project type that I'm not even thinking of yet. The thing that excites me the most right now is like the unknown. I love the fact that I'm building a brand and a business that is adaptable to this crazy world we live in, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I still am an architect and I will be an architect forever. But that doesn't mean I need to practice architecture the same way I have for the last 15 years, right? The built environment is evolving at such a different pace that I think architects need to be more open-minded about how we interact with the world. And I'm very interested in like educating the world about architecture. One of my big pet peeves about myself and architects is that everybody like interacts with the built environment everywhere, every single day. But most of the public knows so little about architecture because architects are not good about talking about architecture, right? Like it's up to architects to educate the world and tell them, why do things look the way they do? Why do we interact with things the way they do? You know, I mean, it's like, it's on us. Let's educate the world, guys. Like, I want to get out there. I want to educate people. I want to have fun with it, right? The process for me is just as important as the product. Like if I'm not having fun with my clients, there's no point, right? So again, kind of back to the brand, like the brand is really meant to be able to evolve as I evolve, as I grow as a professional. You know, I will always be a fee-for-service architect in many ways, but I really, really hope to do a whole lot more as, you know, my next 20, 30 years rolls on. And I think that's
really
very
cool.
exciting. Yeah.
All right. Quick shout out to Laura Souter, who's been a guest on this show, by the way. Agency Bell. She does great work. But here's a point that I think you want to highlight. You design really for the way people live, right? Not just. So what does that look like? How does that play out?
So it's a good question. Yeah. You know, today is such a complicated world with homes, right? There are so many older style homes that we all try to force our life into. But if you hire an architect and you work with somebody like myself, you actually get to reimagine, like, how can I manipulate this current home to better my life, to enhance my life? So really understanding how somebody wants to live compared to how they are living is a really important thing, right? Like just because you get up every day and you have this routine in your current home doesn't mean you need to have that same routine in a new home. So like put some imagination together, put some imagination goggles on. Let's think about, what would your ideal day look like? How would that feel? How would that function? How would you move through the home? What's the first thing you're going to interact with when you wake up? Where do you want your bedroom? How do you want your kitchen to be placed in the home? So, you know, I'm really able to kind of go down this exploratory phase with my clients and really dream with them a little bit. And through the process of design and 3D visualization tools we have now, I can really show clients like, hey, this is what it could feel like to be in this home. Does this feel like something that interests you? And, you know, through an iterative process, it takes time. It's not a one and done thing. It takes months sometimes. But we really together kind of get to explore how one could live in a home or a space and make that space enhance your life on a daily basis compared to being a hindrance. You know, I mean, there's so much built environment that was built in the 50s and 60s. Well, we don't live the same way we did in the 50s and 60s, you know? Let's update that. And that doesn't have to mean tearing down every single home. Especially in New England here, the building stock is fantastic. Great bones, has such an ability to transform. And through that transformation, you can transform your life. I live in a space that I designed myself, and it has transformed my life because I got to make the decisions. I really think, and you know, it's something David Hassin used to say, like every architect should live in a space they designed for themselves.
That's awesome.
And boy, is he right. He is
and
right.
Is it a single family?
It is I live on the top floor of a triple decker in JP. Yep. And so we bought this place. It was not in good shape, and I gutted it and just redid the whole thing. It was quite a process.
Another thing that's pretty foreign to people outside of New England. What was the year of construction?
1902.
Wow. Yeah. Our house in Rosendale was built in 1935. So.
Yep.
We're farther outbound than you by, few minutes. So it makes a difference.
Yep. That's true. That's very true.
All right. Talk about one of what you would call one of your signature ArnoldAnd projects. And that's the Charles Cove House in Dover, Mass., which is one town over from where I grew up, Medfield, and where my mother taught high school for many years. But that house was built in, I think, 1868, right? It's undergone a number of additions and changes over the years. I think the most recent was in the 60s. Tell us about that project and why it's an ArnoldAnd signature project.
So, I mean, that project is a very cool project.
Mm,
It's, like you said, the 1860s, so it has a lot of history.
mm,
And in New England, context and history is very important.
mm,
So, through that project, we, the clients, one of the clients said to me early on is like, we want to be good shepherds of this house.
mm.
We
That's
we
cool.
need to,
That's cool.
yeah, very cool. We need to undo some of the things that they did in the 60s because they don't jive with how we live today. But still, we need to be respectful of this 1860s house because it needs to stand as
Mm.
it did all the way back then.
Now,
So we
is
were
it
able,
sorry, quick
please.
interjection. Is it a listed historical property?
It's technically not registered, although it
Okay.
does have its plaque on it. But yeah, it's actually not on the historic register. I think because it had the additions
Yeah.
later,
Yeah.
and it's
That gives
not.
you more leeway.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. But luckily, these clients, saying they want to be good
Mm,
stewards from the get-go, that was
mm,
a goal. We were able to preserve the kind of colonial, symmetrical nature of the home,
mhm,
while the kind of additions kind of chart on the side. And so from the street, it still looks like a fairly kind of smallish, modest home. And as you kind of go around it, you can see how we've added on in a very respectful way.
mm,
But it's a really interesting project because we're taking this modern family of four, husband and wife, two kids, two boys. They like sports, they like activities, and they want to live a kind of modern lifestyle in this historic home.
mm,
So again, how do you do that? In the historic home, we've kind of preserved some of the more cellular natures of the home with like a smaller living room, a reading room, an office, compared to the addition, which is more of an open living dining space,
mm.
right? A larger space for the family to commune on a daily basis, but preserve the smaller spaces in the existing home for the more kind of reflective moments of life,
Do you
right?
have some of these images on the website?
I do.
Good,
Yes.
good,
Yes. There is a rendering of the house on the website. I
good,
believe it's the splash page. Um,
good.
but yeah,
And
so
everybody, just we'll get there again, but that's ArnoldAnd.com. Go ahead.
yes, please. So yeah, it was kind of a good charge and a challenge how to make a modern facing home,
Mm,
but yet respects the kind of historical nature of its context. And as you know, Dover has a lot of older kind of
hmm
contextual homes,
hmm
New England homes.
Right.
So the home, it needed to exude New England, but yet still have its kind of modern flair to it, kind of representing this kind of modern family,
Mm.
right?
All right. What are I have two last questions. Believe it or not, we're almost done. What are your plans for the future of the firm? Consistent with what you said earlier, you don't want to prescribe the next 5 years, but still, what are you thinking in terms of the future of the firm?
Well, I mean, the firm is growing.
Mm,
Projects are coming in.
mm,
I have some folks helping me part time. I'm, actively trying to figure that out. I
mm.
think there's a real question for me whether I go down the traditional nature of I get a physical space, I open an office, I hire people. That
Yep.
could be a very real trajectory for me. But
Yep.
the one of the things that I've really cherished about this last year is I get to rethink everything I did in the past. So
Mm,
I am actively challenging that assumption on whether I should go down that traditional path. And so I'm just like literally asking myself day to day, do I want to do this? Is this the right thing for me in my practice and my brand?
mm.
I'm trying to figure out what is going to pull the best parts of me out and allow them to flourish, right? And not just go down the road of opening a physical space and
Yeah.
doing all the things we all always did because that seems like it's the right thing. So that's been pretty fun and exciting. And now that I have a child and stuff, I have a different perspective on the
Sure.
world.
For sure.
So it's been kind of cool to look at all that in a very different way.
But it is 2025, and there are a lot of possibilities. So, I mean, there are firms that are founded as virtual that have 50 to 100 employees. So it doesn't always
Absolutely.
have to be like I have one client I work with who they've got they had a physical presence. Now they work out of like a workspace, a shared workspace.
Yep.
Only when they need it, everybody else is virtual. So
Yep.
it's quite
Something I'm
possible.
definitely exploring.
All right. He is Matthew Arnold. His website is ArnoldAnd.com. His email is Matthew@ArnoldAnd.com. Matt, this has been fun for me. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate you having me here.
Well, thanks again. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. As most of you know, this is a show about business and business challenges. If you've got concerns about the sales effectiveness and growth of your company, whether your sales team is you or really small or really large, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn, and that's at Winning Business Radio. Or you can drop me a note, kevin@winningbusinessradio.com. Our company is Winning Incorporated. We're part of Sandler Training. We develop sales teams into high achievers and sales leaders into true coaches and mentors. Listen, we're not a fit for everybody, but hey, maybe we should have a conversation. Thank you, as always, to Juan, our producer and engineer, for another job well done. I appreciate you, Juan. Be sure to join us again next week, Monday, May 12th. We'll do it all over again. Until then, this is Kevin ArnoldAnd.
You've been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin ArnoldAnd. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin ArnoldAnd and Winning Business Radio.